Hello, my name is Leander Ridgway, and this here is the Biblical Core Values. Here I will be discussing the six core values, which include service, social justice, dignity and worth of the individual, importance and certainly of the human relationship, integrity, and competence. With these six core values, I will be discussing that within the first two books and the only two books of Corinthians, first and second Corinthians. Um, a little quick backstory on First and Second Corinthians. These are written letters by Paul. Paul went to the city of Corinth and founded the church there. So throughout those first two books, Paul is teaching and trying to help the people of Corinth. To get started with the first core value, service. Paul served the people of Corinth. Um, Paul truly and deeply cared for the people and served them, bringing bringing people closer to Jesus as possible. Um, Paul would share the gospel with people, especially his first his first meeting there in First Corinthians. He spent a year and a half in the city, and he would just speak to people, um, talk to people about Jesus, and just sharing the gospel. Um, Paul, in Paul's way of serving, he gave the people two letters of instruction. Continuing on with social justice, in Second Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9, it says, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich." Paul is describing to the people that regardless if you're poor or not wealthy, Jesus gave his honor and lowered himself and died a death of a poor slave, so that the poverty can be wealthy through God's grace. Paul right here, he's giving the people the gospel. He's also giving people hope in life. Um, and also saying through Christ, everybody is equal. Continuing on, dignity and worth of the individual. Paul's Paul love Paul's loving and caring for the people of Corinth. Regardless of the people disregarding what his letters wrote, he still forgave them and loved them. Second Corinthians chapter 2 verse 4. For I wrote you out of great distress and anguish of heart and with many tears, not to grieve you, but to let you know the depth of my love for you. Regardless of the people hearing these super quote unquote super apostles, he still gave grace and mercy. Second Corinthians chapter 11 verse 5 talks about these super apostles that Paul mentions. It says, "I do not think I am in the least inferior to those quote unquote super apostles." Paul explains to the people that through Jesus' suffering that it brings us new life. Paul suffered. He was living in poverty. He was also living in poverty. To continue on, importance and certainly of human relationship. And this is through First Corinthians chapter 11 through 14. So throughout these four chapters, the people gathered for weekly worship gatherings. This was a place where God's Spirit works in a unified way. The people would use love to help the well-being of one another. The people would be really having powerful spiritual experiences at the gathering. And then some people would preach and some people would teach to one another. So through all that, all the people there, all the people's relationships would build up the church. Everybody plays a role in building up the church. In First Corinthians chapter 12, verse 25 says, "So that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other." Moving on with integrity. Integrity in this instance, I'm gonna talk about sexual integrity. This is First Corinthians chapter 5 through 7. People were sleeping with each other. Men were sleeping with the prostitutes who hung around the courts. People thought it was okay because how God's grace is. Sexual integrity is how we respond to Jesus' love and grace. Being a follower of Jesus means no compromise when it comes to sexual integrity. First Corinthians chapter 5 verse 9 says, I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexual immoral people. Also, First Corinthians chapter 5 verse 11 says, but now I am writing to you that you must not associate with anyone who claims to be a brother or sister, but is sexually immoral or greedy, an idolater or a slanderer, a drunken or a swindler. Do not even eat with such people. And then to finish with the last value, competence. Paul is writing the letter to the people. Um, Paul wrote a letter to the church of the city of Corinth. Paul came a missionary, spent 1.5 years there getting to know the people and talk to them about Jesus, something that I mentioned earlier. He left, but found out that it wasn't going so well, so he came back to the church, and he came back in 2 Corinthians. Then he decided to write the letters that we have in 1st and 2nd Corinthians. Um, Paul did a really great job of reaching out to the people and explaining and helping with their issues. And yeah, there we have it. The 6 core values with 1st and 2nd Corinthians.